That to me is the ultimate challenge. If I go out and fight against someone with anger, all I've done is increase the anger, and that's not my goal.
The first person we lead is ourself. Welcome to Because This Matters, a podcast about leading from the inside out. I'm Mark Poise, and in each conversation, we explore how values take shape and become action, how people with clarity navigate change, challenge, and growth with intention. A quick note from your host. Nancy and I had a few technical difficulties as we recorded this interview, and I'm ultimately relying on a backup recording. You'll hear a few audio artifacts, but I hope they don't take away from your enjoyment of the overall conversation. Today, I'm joined by Nancy Hajek, owner of Dream Lodge Hypnotherapy in Nashville, Tennessee. Originally from the Chicago area, Nancy began her path studying art and botany at Southern Illinois University before a single word in a library, metaphysics, redirected her life. That curiosity led her to study and ultimately teach at the School and College of Metaphysics in Missouri for 8 years. Her journey has woven together entrepreneurship and spiritual inquiry, from opening a flower wholesaler in Birmingham while teaching metaphysics at night and serving as a minister for Unity South, to studying with Michael Newton after reading his book Journey of Souls and ultimately joining his new institute. Since moving to Nashville in 2002, Nancy has continued her work through Dream Lodge Hypnotherapy, supporting clients in clinical outcomes while also specializing in past life and life between lives regression. Nancy, I am so grateful you're here with me. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
So this idea that has bound this podcast concept together is one of values and having clarity and navigating life with clarity. I know that not only do you strike me as someone who has that, but you also get to work with so many people who are uncovering their own in really deep ways. When we look at this phase of life that you find yourself in right now, are there values that are top of mind that you could share with listeners?
Yeah, and it's somewhat directly related to what you just said. Getting to work with people in a certain way when they are at some sort of juncture in their life where they're asking questions, they're curious, they want to know more, usually about who they are and or what they're doing here and their relationship to the world. Um, that can take so many different forms. It's as individual as each person that comes, but there's something exciting about that. And I think, I didn't always know what to call it, but I've always valued that space, that relationship. I used to call it kind of heaven, where two people are sharing space. We're looking for the same thing, and then something happens, some light or combustion or love or just something comes through. And oh God, I love that so much. So I it's a kind of joy for me, and I look for that joy. Um, I think we all have felt it, but often it's spontaneous, and we might just have it for a second, and we don't know how to get it back again. Um, so I think most of my life has been, how do you get that back? What is that? What are the elements? Where does that come from? How do you end up in this space with another person? Um, how can you walk yourself and maybe help them walk into it so it can be more of an ongoing experience in life? So I'd say if that answers a value, that would be what I value.
It's so striking because, on one level, I could listen to what you just said and I hear you really value your work and the healing that you get to do with people. And on another level, I'm hearing values that, knowing the type of work that you do, that you value creating that presence and you value that collaboration with another human being, and you value this openness and
Yeah.
growing, there's so much depth to it and so many colors in the way you describe your.
I found the more an individual is doing the work inside in themselves, the more astounding those moments are, the more light and love come through and joy. But I hate elitism. I don't wanna be exclusive to just that genre of people or experience. So I mean, to me, growing up, I didn't have it so much with people in my family. They weren't an open, loving group. But I had it with dogs always, horses, animals, where so it told me I could have that, you know, in different places. Um, and as I grew and taught originally when I was in my 20s, there was that wonderful it's that kinship. I had, those happen there, but I didn't want it just to be exclusive to that. So my question to myself was, can I have that experience of anybody, everyone, no matter where they're at in their life, no matter what they're doing or not asking or so that's what I really was curious about is how do I how do I walk around in that state and feel that kinship with everyone. So, not that I have that down, but that's always been my practice and my goal. So,
That just reminds me of listening to some of the great lectures from the Dalai Lama, talking about
mm,
this need for openness, compassion without limits. But you actually orient your life that way, searching for that. You've made your career and your life's work trying to do that for yourself as well as others, and that's what's so remarkable to me.
it just seemed, you know, maybe it seems grandiose to someone else, but you know how it is when you're inside your own world in your own head. It just seemed like the only reasonable thing to do of life for me. Um, but that reminded me of the Dalai Lama, the Buddhists, have the saying, and the Buddhists would say whoever would come, for blessings or help or advice or lessons, he would address everyone who came, "Oh, nobly born." Just that just gives
Mm.
me chills, trying to bring a person back to themselves. Um, do you know, Father Greg Boyle, the Jesuit priest in LA who has Homeboy Industries, works with the gang members? He is such an inspiration for me. He was, in the Jesuit tradition, so Catholic and particularly Jesuit. So he comes from a very religious background, although he's quite irreverent about, as a lot of Jesuits are, about the way the church does things badly. Um, but he, his philosophy is all of this, how he's worked with gang members and had rehabilitation, the largest rehab center in the world for gang members. And it's such a beautiful thing that he set up there. And it's based on, um, Saint Ignatius, who was the founder of the Jesuits. Father Boyle quotes him, Ignatius, who often has this word, acatamiento, a Spanish word in his writings. He used that the Jesuits interpreted as affectionate awe. And it's something that Ignatius felt the flow between him and his God, he and his God, and he called it acatamiento. Father Boyle takes that as an assignment to experience that with every person on earth so that heaven can be right here on earth. And it gives me goosebumps. And he's working with, we're not talking about people that might annoy you a little bit. He's talking about violent people, that are abused and just the outskirts, everyone would like to ignore. Um, and to me, what a practice, God, what a practice that is. So he's just what I love about him is he articulates so beautiful all the things I think I've figured out in my life, but maybe not didn't articulate as well. So he said the first thing you have to do is find a way to anchor your attention somehow when you're with another person. Anchor it in the moment, be in the present moment. We know the value of that. But then the second thing is to then cherish the other person. Um, as much kindness and tenderness, and know that there's no giver and receiver. There's no teacher and student. It's just kinship. And that's where that flow happens. Um, and he says, and therefore you never get burned out when you serve because you're you're not giving and they're not receiving. It's just one whole space of flow and light and love, and our wounds are the same, our joys are the same. Um, so yeah, he Dalai Lama does that well. I think Mother Teresa tried to do it. I don't know if her heart was as big as the others in that, because she has that quote where she says, "We all belong to each other," and that's what we've forgotten is we all belong to each other.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Gosh, I love Father Boyle already. Thank you. I have a lot of homework to do here. That's exciting. Every time I hear about one
Yeah,
of these people in the world that is doing that level of deep, unconditional work, it's just so heartening, you know?
I know. Exactly. And I think the more you look, the more you find them. And I think he's even gotten what do you call it, a presidential Medal of Honor, like at the White House. I
Okay.
didn't You don't hear that news though, you don't hear about these people in the news much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, very, very inspirational.
Yeah. The most deep and exciting stories somehow aren't worthy of the 6 o'clock headlines
Mm,
in the
yeah.
wildest way. Uh,
I
you
know, right?
You mentioned this kind of clarity, and you said it wasn't really part of your household growing up, and that you did always get it from
Mm,
animals. What was the process, or can you paint a picture of the phase of life when you were really opening up in to this
mm.
extent and realizing this much clarity about how you wanted to invest your own energy?
Yeah. Um, I had it on the inside from when I can remember being really young in terms of, I guess the main clarity I would say I had was I was aware there were two different worlds. There was an inner world and there was an outer world. I didn't know what else to call it. I didn't know the word soul very well, so I called it the inner person and the outer person. I could see that difference in people. And, as all kids do, I'd have those flying dreams, and it would be in the front yard of my mom and dad's house in my dream, and you just lift off a certain way, and you just catch the right layer, and then you're off in this unbelievable freedom. And in the dreams, I would keep saying, why can't you figure out how to do this when you wake up? It's just right here. You just jump it like this. You got to catch this layer. It drove me crazy that I knew it was as real as the outer world, but I couldn't figure out how to, it's like that in the Harry Potter films. It made me think of it when they aren't catching the train to go to the school, and they're on that platform, and if they walk it, there's all regular Muggle people walking around, and if they walk a certain way right into the brick post thing, they'll go right through it and end up in another dimension. That's how it was. It was like, I know it's that easy. So anyway, but that idea of being in two different worlds and wanting to explore what that inner one was and why is this outer one here and how do you combine them. When I was 18 is probably when, um, everything really burst open wide, um, when I did my first hallucinogenic drug, and, I went right to well, I didn't go right there, I had to figure out how to work in there, but I went into the biggest love and light. I was just it was just so overwhelming and beautiful and, crying, and I'm like, "I can't believe, this exists, this is here, this" and it was so real, and, um, I mean, from that moment forward, all I wanted to do was figure out how do you do that? How do you bring that to earth or in mind and the outer expression, and the rest of my life after that has been just figuring out the details. Like how we um, you know, what do you have to cultivate to do that? And it wasn't like I wanted to escape anything. I just wanted to bring that to the outer world. Um, Again, it was that joy. It was like I was so connected, attached to that joy. Um, so, I learned things along the way in the School of Metaphysics. My mentor there, Jerry Rothermel, he was very big on undivided attention being the most powerful force in the universe and used the Yogananda Kriya lessons, to teach that and concentration. And um, that I really needed a lot. So that really helped me establish um, the tool to bring all of that energy to a focus and allow that channel to open. Um, he also taught me more about the two worlds where I remember I had to direct us one of the branches at one point, and there was a teacher there, a young guy just in training, and I figured out he was probably stealing from the school books. And, I love this guy so much, it really put me in a quandary. She was just so full of life and beautiful and it was hard to deal with that. So Jerry, I would go back and forth, I'm off with his head or, I can't do, but he, uh he said, "Well, it's easy to go one way or the other. You can just pretend he's this wonderful person and he doesn't have anything to learn, or you can go the other way and see him as a criminal, or you could take the hard route, which is always keep in mind and connected to what you feel is his inside soul self and address the outer self and its behavior simultaneously." And it's hard. And I love that. That's what I love
Mm.
to try to do, you know?
That
That way you don't condemn or criminalize someone. It really is so much easier to see behavior like that. I think people with children will have that experience with their kids a lot. It's like, "Oh my god, can you how many times do I have to tell you this?" But you never really lose that, "This is the best thing that's ever happened to the world," you know? So, you have that yeah, that beautiful connection to the inside, yet you learn to address the outside and try to hold those 2 together.
yeah. What is just so beautiful to me is your unwavering commitment to what you know to be true on these fronts, and your
Yeah.
your your belief that's anchored in, evidence-based reality from your own life, that this is something I can do.
Mm.
To cultivate this, to
Ah,
that love that you mentioned after your first psychedelic experience.
yeah.
Some people look at that and they say, "It happened to me. I need more drugs, or maybe God will grant me this again in my life." And instead,
Yeah.
you saw it as something that is within your free will to cultivate this in your life, not to ask for it to just show up again.
Well, I can't be playing as innocent as I never asked for it to show up again using hallucinogens because I did it plenty. But also, the truth is, the very first moment that that happened, the first time, for whatever reason, I knew that it wasn't the drug. I knew that it was opening me up to some place, um, and that that place was available to me if I could figure out how to get there. And that thought, dogged me the rest of the time I took hallucinogens because it's like, you can get in here yourself, right? You just have to figure it out. And so when I entered the school of metaphysics, the first rule was no drugs, no drinking, it's you're gonna learn how to do this by will. And it's like, yay, darn.
No more cheat codes, students. You need to do this with a slide rule.
What a beautiful, I think there's such a place for those medicines. Nowadays, it is seen more as medicine. It's funny when I was growing up younger than that, and I'd watch the evening news with my parents who were pretty conservative. And the newsreels of the hippies and all the stuff they were doing would come on. And, my parents were like, oh, those hippies. But there were little bits of things about hallucinogenic drugs and those. I remember in all those news things. And from the time I was very young and I heard that, I said, as soon as I can get a hold of that, I'm doing that. Out of all the things I saw on television, isn't that funny? So I think that was a pre-incarnative choice, to um, if I needed a boost to figure out how to get what I was here for, what I was here to do, and
Yeah, well, and several of those were ancient medicines, and then they had a a boost in the 60s and early 70s, right? And now they're finally coming around again. Like I've heard it called the third wave, where there's this amazing research being done, and things are finally being legitimized, even if people aren't speaking in say spiritual and metaphysical terms, just that they are acknowledging the transformative effects that these can have, regardless of, whether they are only looking at our three-dimensional evidence-based reality or not. I love the Buddhist concept of skillful means, that
Mm,
sometimes we can use things that may not be ultimately true, but we can use them well to take us further on the path of truth.
I like
Um,
that.
and sort of like if all you have is a hammer, but you need to get a job done, you can use that hammer in some creative ways if
Yes.
you're missing the exact tool that you needed. And that's not a bad thing. That's sometimes part of the process.
Yes. Again, it's not a tool that's good or bad. It's what you're doing with it, right? So,
Yeah. One of the reasons that I had to invite you on this thing is because of the amount of clarity that you have that is uncommon. Some people have this clarity that is clearly intellectualized, and I know this, and this is what I've chosen for myself. And some people have a heart-centered clarity, and yours, I'd be tempted to say it's heart-centered, but it's almost like you've got one foot in this world and one in the next in the best possible way. And I wonder about what thoughts you could share with anyone listening about how you deal with the inherent conflict or rubs that happen in such a material world, in the Western world here, when you
Yeah.
have such clarity and the world, doesn't always agree. Let's put it that way. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, thank God. The first thing I say is thank God I'm out in my 20s because I think when we're in our 20s, we need to prove ourselves, prove our theories, prove everything that we believe is right, and we need other people to understand what we're talking about. Whew, I'm glad those 20s are over. So, um, I think the older you get, hopefully, I think for most people, there's a sort of relaxation that occurs with all of that where, um, how my clients do this sometimes. They have these beautiful theories and really be true and, vibrant. Um, but they're having problems in life because their husband or their wife or their boss or don't understand these things. And I thought, okay, I used to be like that. I remember that. Luckily, it didn't last too long. So I would start out saying a lot of because of my work and what I've been interested in my life, I'm seeing always as us as souls coming into incarnation. So we come from this felicity and this grandeur and freedom and beauty and connectedness. And then we're packaged into these little bodies and cut off from all of that. And, we're in little bodies that are fear based. We need to survive somehow. So that's the challenge, and, intelligently planned challenge. So, let's see how you do. You say you wanna love? Let's try this, Why we put you down here, cut you off from all your connections on the inside and your memories, and, we'll have things happen to you, and let's see how you do with that. So we each kind of plan our own kind of unique set of those things, I believe. Um one of your pre-interview questions I loved was something about the tension between values. I think that tension is planned and born from the moment we hit the ground. We want that tension. We bring forth certain understandings, and we set ourselves up for those to be challenged. And what are you gonna do with that? How are you gonna integrate, assimilate? You're gonna throw one out through and I don't think there's a right or wrong choice. I think the soul hopes that each of our souls hopes we might do a certain thing. But whatever we do, there's gonna be learning for us in it. So I think it's really good to start on the premise of just accepting life, period, is a challenge. We come in here to feel the tension, to feel that. It's so funny that we're all given these fairy tales when we're little, though, huh? Where everything ends up beautiful, and isn't that funny? I don't know if that's our memories of the inner world that we write those from, or, um, yeah, I don't know, but I think that's why people get angry so often because their life does not go like that. Um, or because of especially with, media these days, they'll see someone else's life that looks so perfect, and they're angry that their life does not look that way. Um, but, I mean, the bottom line is we all have challenges, we've set them up for ourselves. Some are more ballsy and gutsy than others when setting up their challenges. Um, but if we start at that premise, um then we can at least in my mind, I'm walking around seeing everybody like that. Um, yes, I'm seeing how you walk, I see how you look, I see how you dress, and I'm affected by all of that. I hear what you're saying. And at the same time, I'm thinking, who is this guy? Who is this soul? Who's in there, And where did they come from and what are they doing here? That is just so exciting to me. I don't know why. Um, I just get such a kick out of people, but it's because I'm feeling them in all those different ways at once. I find them intriguing. Um, my interviews in regression are so ridiculously long because I love people talking like that. And I'm hearing what they're saying, but then I'm getting other stuff and I think, wow, this person is amazing. What's so funny is I feel a little selfish in that, um, but it seems, and this is back to Father Greg Boyle, it seems that as I'm doing that with a person and taking all that in, something's changing in them. They're relaxing. Again, we want to walk people home together. We want to take them back to themselves. And in my 20s, I learned to be the server, the teacher, the saver, healer. Pull, that's such a hard job. I don't want that anymore. But back to that, if I'm just the witness and present and amazed by another person's journey and their thoughts and um, something happens in to them inside, and I don't know what to call that other than they relax into themselves a little bit more. Now, do I do this all the time flawlessly, perfectly? No. No, it's breath by breath, moment by moment, not one day at a time. It's like second
Yeah.
by second because the more aware you are in watching your own thoughts, you're learning where all your challenges and resistances are. You know, we say work on yourself, love yourself first. I find that very hard to do. I'm much more amazed at other people than at myself, but it works. So if I'm listening to you or someone else talk about themselves, um, I'm listening, but I'm also aware of resistances coming up in my own head. Like if someone says, well, this is just the way it is. And I'm thinking, well, I don't think that's really the way it is. You know, do I want to say that? Sometimes I do, and that's not good. But it's a way to catch yourself. So if someone else is putting out resistance or putting up a mask or whatever it is, um, I'm going to be reacting to that. Now, what do I do with that reaction? Do I say, okay, shh, and put it down and open back up and see what's behind that fear in that person? Or in my mind, am I thinking, all right, when's the next opening I will have to be able to drop this word of wisdom to them? So you're waiting for, so it's all about me at that point. What
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
I say to help them? Oh my God, that wears me out by the end of the day when I catch myself doing that. So all of the life, all of every day, the hours are, I call it catching yourself red-handed because that's the way you open up and pull out little pieces of resistance and you feel that openness more and more. Pim Chodron, I think, calls it, she just calls it catching yourself. That's the practice. I don't know, I like the red-handed, it reminds me of the cartoons when I was little, "Catch yourself red-handed."
Yeah. I love Pema
So,
Children's writing. She's such a beautiful author. I've never read anything she's written that doesn't have that sort of essence to it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think going back to your original question, it's a practice, some days I I hermit myself and don't think of anything, but, that's even harder because you always have people in your head, right? And I realize I've got a little lecture going to so and so or so and so, and I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute, that's not the relationship. If they were right in front of me, I wouldn't want to be feeling that. So it's a luxury for a person to be in front of me because it just calls all of my practice to attention. When I'm alone in my head, oh my God, I get away with a lot more crap. So, but it's good to do it yourself when you can.
Yeah, we're all subject to the tendencies of a human brain, right?
Yeah.
They tend to be wired a certain way. I wonder this concept that you have raised of amazement and how you manage to, sort of bring that forth in the moment when you're doing your your work, but also, work with a capital W, not just when you're in session. What would you say to people that want to cultivate more amazement in their own daily life?
First, if you don't have them already, develop some sort of attention skills, focusing skills. Um, there's so many, and I grew up on the candle exercise. I know you've tried that one, but there's so many out there. Just pick something you like, because you'll probably do it then. Pick something and try to practice it every day. and it automatically starts to work, even if you just put 5, 10, 15 minutes into it. Um, that's really helpful because, like you were saying, our thoughts are so fast and flying constantly through our minds. I doubt we even have an awareness of just a little fraction of what goes through our heads. So that's always in motion. And if you can get some muscle built right here to put uh, some strength behind a focal point, then at least you have a chance to catch a thought going through your mind, right? So that's your tool is your focusing ability. Um, from there, I think a person would have to go with their belief systems. So what I mean by that is, if someone brought up in a religion, usually there's some very fundamental training of how to treat your fellow man. But even more than that, hopefully there's a training or philosophy of an expansive God, someone that's bigger than you, more loving than you. Um, Now, sadly, a lot of our churches don't emphasize that part and go more with a punitive God. That really doesn't help in this area. You'd have to go with something you've kept or learned that says it's bigger, more loving, more expansive, more generous than I am. Doesn't have to be religious though. It could be spiritual. It could be my Uncle Bob. Well, he's the coolest, most generous when I was growing. I said, I want to be just like him. Um, it could be anything that has those qualities. And then pretend, like when you're a kid, pretend to be like that. What if, to be curious, what if I pretended this or pretended I was like that? What if I wondered where this person, it could be from his childhood, what this person came from, what he's been through. Um, because again, I've got the other training. I'm also thinking of where did their soul come from and what was his history as well. Um, so I guess it's just a way to cultivate curiosity about people. If you're curious, you really don't have time to condemn. You know, you're I'm okay with judging. Judging what I mean by black and white, or I judge this behavior is hurtful. But judging is more of a picking apart and saying what's black, what's white, what's red to me. It's not condemning. Condemning is you're lower than this and I'm higher than that.
Mm.
Uh, so, yeah, but back to the curiosity is however you can cultivate it is a big deal. And some kind of role model or idea of something larger, more loving, and more generous than yourself that you want to grow into. And then
Yeah.
your focal point.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That there's a lot there that people can chew on that I can chew on too. And what I love is that you already acknowledge that this is a moment to moment thing and a day to day.
Yeah.
I always love asking people, about their vision for are there any values in the future that they would love to have as core values and what would need to happen for them to get there. And that question doesn't feel right in this conversation because of what you've said, but I'm still curious what comes up in your mind, knowing that that's a question I like to ask.
Mm. The moments when I'm able to hold that perception uh, are a little bit longer, and there are shorter spaces in between each one of them. Um, yeah, that I'm able to catch myself better. I don't know. I guess just keep having more experience with that.
Mhm.
Um, in my line of work, I have the best role models. Although I was raised Catholic, I didn't feel God as a real personal God at all. So my first role model was that love and light that I felt at 18 when I went inward. Um, but apart from that, and I've had a few outward people who displayed that kind of generosity of spirit, openness, curiosity. But on a weekly basis, I'm working with people that are connecting to their primary spirit guide and the elders that work on the inside. And oh my God, I mean, I, I I have such a luxury in that because, you know, I'll be on the outside, working with a client, and I'll be realizing I'm pushing on something in my agenda, not theirs, and I need to back off. But I'm thinking if I could just say this to this person, but then I know they won't. It's not right. They won't hear it right. And then they get up and connect with their guide, and their guide just cuts it to the bone in the most beautiful way. You know, it's like, I don't know how they come in the back door like that, but there's so much love. The client feels no threat, no self-consciousness. Um, and I think to myself, God, those are the masters. I wouldn't be like that. How and so I realize when might say something directly to a person, why isn't it received like that sometimes? Sometimes it is if I'm having a good day, but not always. And it's because I didn't start out with that immense respect and generosity and love, and that's what they're feeling from their guide. Um, so that's what I go to in my mind when I feel myself go off base. It's as easy as just hanging around a person or two that are talking trash, and I could talk trash. I don't want to, but I'll fall into it, at least mentally. And so I'll think, okay, what just happened in my session the other day? That I want to be like that. That's who I want to be like that. I think the other thing is not to get down on yourself too much for all the times you don't hit whatever your goals are. Um, it's again, if if I didn't fail, I wouldn't even be here. I mean, I'm here because I wanted that challenge. I wanted to be thrown off base. I wanted to get better. So without that strength training, so how can I be sad that I just goofed up again? So that's where the humor comes in it for me. And humor is probably one of my biggest values beyond curiosity, because it's that you see the difference between the inside and the outside, and it's really funny, where we're all walking around trying to be something or another, and we're probably not all that at all. And that's okay. Um, that's exactly who we're supposed to be, whatever that is. So anyway.
This having such a broadened perspective as you do because of the work that you do in your life totally changes the paradigm for narratives that we might form around what happens in our lives. And so how
Yeah,
somebody might be so stuck and so narrow-minded, and when their perspective is as wide and, time as wide-ranging as you're alluding to, that this
yeah,
could be, we could describe this in fundamentally different ways, and that's where I hear the space for humor coming in, where, uh a desire for excellence, but like not a pressure or um
yeah.
a need to be perfect right now, which never really turns out so so well.
Mhm. Right, right. Yeah, yeah,
It
exactly.
yeah, it's such a softer approach.
Yeah.
I'm interested in your day to day, maybe even outside of your work, when you notice yourself, like you mentioned, oh, I could get caught talking trash.
Uh,
When you notice yourself getting off track, what do you do to bring yourself back into alignment?
well, first things first, I try to shut up. Quit. If I'm if I'm with other people and they're going down that route, um, I'll usually try to say something to soften any harshness that's going on, maybe criticism of another person, Um, something general because not the majority of the people I'm with outside of work are not studying the same things I study, they're regular folks on the street. Um, so some of them know what I do, some of them don't, some of them wanna know, some don't care, so it doesn't matter. I don't talk about this, I just try to be it, that's my thought is I just wanna be it. So, yeah, so I usually try to say something that I know they won't reject, um, but it softens it, brings it a little bit back more to kindness. I'm trying to get back to that kindness. Um, and usually kinda just like people just say, "Oh, yeah, right, yeah," and that kinda ends the conversation, which is good because we don't want it to go much further than that. So
Yeah.
that's usually what I do. Yeah, something like that.
When you look at the world at large, maybe it's the culture that we live in, maybe it's all of planet Earth. I don't know. Take that how you want. Take that. Are there any particular values or value sets that you think are misunderstood right now?
First, I would just go back to, when any of us start to find ourselves condemning something, again, we might be accurate in what we're seeing, something is hurtful or not hurtful, we might be accurate. But we have to remember, I think that that's an individual soul or a group of souls with a certain history, with a certain bend. They're here to have an experience. Um, that's the way they're expressing. That's what's important to them. That's what they're chasing. Whatever happens, they're going to come out of it with a great treasure. Maybe that person and I won't have much of a intersection in this lifetime. If their focus is very different. But that's okay. We're all here to achieve and do different things. Um, when I say achieve, though, I mean on the inside. I think the outer things we pursue are, again, just tools. But we're really here to achieve things on the inside. Um, so someone pursuing wealth may or may not achieve those things on the inside. And, you kind of got to be careful because the more attractive things on the outside, the more compelling they are to the outer mind and ego. Sometimes it lulls us into complacency. There's that old saying, something like, um, too much satisfaction leads to complacency. Too little satisfaction leads to paralysis. So you can come in to a very hard environment or have huge challenges before you in a life. And for a lot of people, they excel internally in terms of what they are learning. You'll hear people say that all the time. I grew up poor, and this taught me this, or I've had cancer, it taught me that. Best thing that ever happened to me. So you never know. And some people, though, get so mired down in difficulties that they fall into pity and have a hard time learning anything. So I guess I would always ask myself, first, who am I to judge, Um, but they must be learning something. They're drawn to something. I hope it pays off for them internally. Now, at the same time, I completely believe in activism and resistance in the social world, in the outer world, if that's where you feel your value is. So, if someone's against a political party, for instance, or a certain action, um, I say more power, to a person, go out and speak your mind, write, whatever, be an activist. However, the actual assignment is to love that other person as the creator, as akin to you, while you are resisting. That to me is the ultimate challenge. If I go out and fight against someone with anger, all I've done is increase the anger. And that's not my goal. Well, some people don't mind. That might be a goal of theirs. It's not my goal. So if I can't, if I can't act in the world with love, then I have to back up a step and try to reestablish that, and then try it again. So that's very important to me. Um,
Yeah.
I think we could affect the world without ever making a move if we always do this mentally, but I think it's much even more powerful if we're doing both at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine that if you do it so well mentally, it just kind of oozes out with any action that you do from the way you're
Mhm.
describing it. I love this. Everything you just described really communicates a sense that there can always be a deeper narrative than we're seeing. There can always be a deeper meaning than we're seeing, and we may not be privy to it. And that you're always leaving that space open to acknowledging that might be the
Yes,
case.
yes, exactly.
If you had the attention of the entire world for, I don't know, a minute ish, picture like a commercial, and to make a sales pitch or a value, what would you advocate for? And what would the sales pitch be to all eight some billion of us for that minute?
We're all in this together. I think each one of us really has a sense of that inside, even if we don't have these big openings of consciousness experiences. Um, I think there's that sense that we have. You see it to all these little places like, in church, some of the churches you turn and you shake the person's hand next to you. And like the Quakers have the healing circles where they put the afflicted in the center and just pour this love into them. So I think we have this sense. The thing is, the outer world doesn't reward it. The outer world is a world of purposely made for challenge to love. It purposely tries to split us apart. It's made that way. We shouldn't be mad about that. Any one of us that's not mentally ill, and I mean in a very large way, um, I think feels that kindness is the world they want to live in. That's the only sane world. Everyone, not everyone, but I say the great majority of people on earth want to live in a kind and generous and tender world. So that's what I would appeal to. Now, how would that work? I don't know. But again, that's our challenges. How can I, because we as our culture and the world will tell us you're a sucker, you're a sucker. People are going to take advantage of you. And I actually, I was in Teotihuacan one time, the pyramid plaza down outside Mexico City of the Toltecs. That was their uh, plaza. Um, and I was with a group, and I was with a boyfriend at the time. It was a new relationship. He was in the group. I wasn't. I was just tagging along, as a lot of those stories start. So, so I'm tagging along. And the leader of the group says, pair off and here's your assignment. We were walking down these roads and corridors. None of us, I had never been there before. And it was, rural around the pyramids. Um, so one person closes their eyes or we put a bandana on or something, but definitely can't see. And you're going to rely on your partner to tell you how to walk and get to the site that we're going to. And there are cars going by. So I'm the walker and my guy's the director, right? And I realized after a little while he's letting me trip and fall and run into everything, you know? And after a little bit I said, "What is the deal here?" And he said, Nancy, you cannot walk through the world the way you do. You're going to get run over by a bus. You've totally trusted me. And I showed you you can't be that way." And I was like, I think that was the effing assignment. But I love that. I love that. That is so the mindset, of you 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 can't be a fool, you know? Uh, when I was little, there's a cartoon. I only remember one cartoon in the funny papers when I was little, and it was this hairy blob of a guy named Irwin, and he was a fool, sort of. So someone comes up and hands him a suitcase with $1 million in it, and he says, "Thank you." And then the next frame, someone walks by and he hands them the suitcase with $1 million and says, "Here you go." And that person says, "Thank you." So it was like, it meant nothing to him. It was just a nice gesture. And I thought, I've never forgotten that. I don't know why. In my mind, it was like, could I do that? Could I be that? Yeah, I can. I can. I have to work at it, but I can.
Wow.
So,
Thank you so much for sharing your your clarity that you have with the people that listen to this. Can I invite you to share how people can get in touch with you if they would like? I'll also take this moment to vouch for your work because I have worked with you and you do
yeah.
incredibly transformative work. So,
Okay.
how could people reach you if they're interested in talking to you directly?
You could email me at Dream Lodge, one word, at Earthlink, the old-fashioned earthlink.net. Um, and then we could set up a call from there. I'm one that will tend to interview someone ahead of time on the phone, see what a person's interests are, and if it feels like the work might be what they want or what they could use, and then we go from there and set up an appointment.
Any parting things that you'd like to share that perhaps I should have asked or that you wanted to hope to share?
All of this to say it's like the old golden rule, right? Treat others as you would like to be treated. Um, it's just it's pervasive, it's simple. It's just that we try to complicate things because we'll say, "Yeah, I would do that, but this is why I can't do that." So that's what we want to catch ourselves at is why are we trying to talk ourselves out of what we really want, which is just to feel loved and to give love and feel joy and yeah. So just to keep remembering that we really all want that same thing.
I love that idea. Let's not talk ourselves out of what we really want.
Yeah.
What a beautifully distilled notion.
We're so sneaky. And we're very clever, at all these stories we tell ourselves. So yeah, you just got to kind of be on it and be listening and catching yourself. Yeah.
That's all for this episode of Because This Matters. I believe that these are conversations that matter. If something from this conversation spoke to you, please consider sharing it with someone. Maybe take a moment to like, rate, follow, or subscribe on your podcast platform of choice or on YouTube. You can learn more about my work as a coach and speaker at markpoise.com. Until next time, remember that a life aligned with values is a fulfilled one.